Thanks for coming to our talk. We don't have a lot of time, so let's get started. The topic of our research study was understanding the phenomena of undergraduate leadership experiences in student organizations. My name is Adam Klutzer. Also on this project were Rebecca Mott, John Tummins, John Simonson, and Jalen Peckman, all of whom work at the University of Missouri and none of whom are pictured here. So, one of the things that we know about problems is that they're supposedly becoming more complex and more interconnected. And if we're going to feed 9 billion people by the year 2050, we probably need to engage in some attitude shifting and behavior changing. And we consider that, at least in part, the domain of leadership. And indeed, evolutionary biologists would also agree that the primary purpose of leadership is to help, organizations, communities, societies, nations adapt and engage in social change to be able to continue to thrive. So, colleges of agriculture have long been engaged in this leadership development arena. That we typically tend to think of that in terms of what happens in the classroom, but we also know that what happens outside of the classroom is also very important. One of the places where students get to do this on a day in and day out basis is in student organizations in colleges of agriculture. Another thing that we tend to know is that employers consistently report a gap between what they had hoped for and what they got in terms of skills, particularly applied skills, and one of those is leadership. So when you take all those things together, we think it's probably important to know what is happening inside their student organizations, particularly in terms of how those students characterize their leadership experiences there, and is it what we hope for? So we used the leader identity development model put forward by Susan Komovez and friends as the theoretical framework for this study. There are actually 6 steps, but we really only have time for 3. So number 3 is leader identified, and that's this idea that people who are at this level tend to think of leadership as tantamount to position. They tend to see a leader-follower role as being dichotomous, and when they do have a position, they tend to do it in a very authoritative way. Number 4, leader differentiated. This level tends to see leadership as possible from coming from anywhere, and that everybody should be engaged in leadership, and that when they do have the opportunity to have a position, they tend to be a bit more democratic and participative. Generativity is also this idea that people will start to take responsibility for the development of themselves and others, and hoping to build like a leadership development pipeline to contribute to the organization's sustainability long term. So our research objectives were basically to figure out what is happening, like what does participation and engagement look like in our student organizations, and then what do those students think that their leadership experience has been there. Our methods were a single intrinsic case study approach using a bounded system of the Kaffner clubs, of which there are about 50. Our primary data source was focus groups. We did 2 rounds of multiple focus groups with about 20 to 30 people per round. For the data analysis, we used the constant comparative method, and we used open axial and selective coding. So, in terms of finding the discussions, we had 5 themes that emerged. Some of these will not surprise you. So one of the things that people talked about, like why they participate, was that there's the social aspect of it. They like to be around people who are like them, particularly people who are engaged in the same major. But there's also like a transactive sort of a aspect of it. We might call it credentialing. There's this idea that I'm in a club and that's the thing that I can write down on my resume and hopefully somebody will hire me because of that. When we talked to them about what makes their organization successful or what is success, for them success was universally having good events with high attendance. When we talked about some of the problems that they faced, well, the number one problem was getting commitment from members. We usually found a small group of officers who were carrying out most of the work of the club for the members, and they found it very difficult to get people to participate beyond the basics. Another theme that emerged was this idea of the Kaffner culture. Kaffner is the name of our college, and we found that they describe Kaffner as being like a family, and they really like to feel like they belong there more so than other places on campus. One of the things that surfaced among that, though, was that this culture was largely imported from FFA and livestock shows and 4-H, so not created by Kaffner, and that some of the majors on the periphery, like atmospheric sciences and biochem, students that didn't come up through that world, felt very left out. Probably most important for our purposes, though, are what are their perceptions of the leadership role. And for what we found is almost universal. Officers are leaders. Leaders make decisions, leaders do things for members, and leaders are the most responsible for the success or failure of the group. All of these are indicators of level 3 leadership according to the LID model. So when we think about what are the conclusions and ramifications of this, we see motivations to join a club as highly transactional as much as they are social, and probably most important for our purposes, they don't do it to engage in leadership development. Like that did not come up. And also when we think about, what is the level that they tend to be engaging in leadership at, we tend to see predominantly leadership level number 3. The problem with that is if we want to solve complex problems that are highly interdependent, interconnected, and require a lot of thought, you're probably not going to get that with the authoritative expertise of level 3. So if we want to help solve those complex problems, we probably need to figure out how to get these kids to level number 4 so that they can learn how to engage and leverage the talent, creativity, and intelligence and experience of people in their group instead of trying to do all the things for them. Thanks for coming to my talk.